Francis Ngannou just did what no other man could do at PFL Battle of the Giants. Francis Ngannou overcame all the odds. Previously got knocked out in boxing at the beginning of the year. Devastating knockout. Tragically, his son lost his life earlier this year. Had to battle through that. Nobody knows what this man was really going through in terms of what his mentality was. He kept it all under wraps. He kept his emotions really in check all week long heading up to this. All these months leading up to this fight, he's been keeping his emotions and his mentality in check, covering it up from the media. All the emotions spilled over after he defeated Renan Ferreira at PFL Battle of the Giants. The super fights, the first pay-per-view major promotional event for the PFL. What does this spell for the PFL's future? What does this spell for Francis? What does it all mean? We're going to break it all down and give you a little recap on the entire card. But first, shout out to my man Francis Ngannou. We can see the emotion in his face right here, right now. Got the PFL super fight title wrapped around his waist. Absolutely phenomenal performance from Francis. He was taking on a striker who is very, very dangerous. Renan Ferreira is a striker-only type. He's 6'8". He's got like an 87-inch reach. He can strike. He's fast. He can do backflips. He's a heck of a specimen when it comes to just pure athleticism. Francis Ngannou was able to weather an early storm, a couple of strikes early from Renan Ferreira, a couple of calf kicks early on, but nothing too devastating. Francis was able to overcome this, get in on a takedown, and throw down on the ground, use his abilities as a well-rounded martial artist to put an absolute beat down on Renan Ferreira. Brutalized Renan Ferreira in the first round. Got like a 60-something second finish. It was maybe 70 seconds at the most. Absolutely fantastic from Francis. As we know, leading up to this event, it's all been built off the back of Francis, the baddest man on the planet, the lineal heavyweight champion in MMA. Not just the UFC, but in MMA. This guy is the lineal champion. He carries on the legacy of those of Royce Gracie, Shamrock, all these guys that you remember from back in the day, all these guys that you've heard names of, Matt Hughes, all these legends. Actually, Matt Hughes is the welterweight title, but Fedor has at one point technically been the lineal heavyweight champion of the UFC. It's gone from Royce Gracie all the way down to Francis Ngannou, Stipe. John Jones does not connect to this in any way. It went from Stipe to Francis. Francis right now has just defeated Renan Ferreira and carries on the lineal title. Now, this was absolutely brutal from Francis. Let's show you the finish here right now. Let me get my mic turned up and ready to go. I don't know if you saw those shots the way I was. Francis is one of the heaviest punchers on planet Earth. Broke the record on those punch machines at the UFC. This guy's done everything you can do when it comes to strength tests, power punching tests. This guy's got some of the heaviest hands in the world. And he lays guys out flat with one shot on the feet. And he's on Renan Ferreira's back. Renan Ferreira gave up his back. Francis was pummeling shots. Absolutely fantastic there. Just brutalizing Renan Ferreira. Had a couple of follow-up shots to the back of the head. Dan Murgliata, the ref, should have stepped in and stopped it immediately once Renan Ferreira started face planting, put his nose into the ground here. Let's show it again. He takes a couple shots, boom, now he's out. 1, 2. He takes a couple shots as follow-up. A little bit unnecessary, but Francis, that's not his job to stop it. He's brutalizing, hitting from underneath, brutalizing Renan Ferreira. And then he starts hammering over the top, hits him on the back of the head a couple of times, but my God, the power behind these, I can't even imagine. Renan Ferreira took a couple of shots and he had a giant welt on the top of his head. Absolutely cannot say enough about Francis and what he has done in this fight. Overcoming the odds, overcoming that mentality, the heartbreak, the loss of his son, the knockout loss back in February, March, whenever that was. I mean, just overcoming all the odds in terms of the mentality, the psychology of fighting. Francis Ngannou is the baddest man on the planet right now until somebody tops him. We're looking at you, Tom Aspinall, because John Jones, we know, isn't going to do anything. Man, I wish we could get a John Jones Francis Ngannou fight in the PFL. That likely will never happen. This is arguably one of the greatest eras of heavyweight fighting, heavyweight MMA of all time. We've got the likes of Tom Aspinall, one of the young, up-and-coming, most talented, most well-rounded, athletic heavyweights to ever live in MMA. John Jones, obviously a legend, has done things the likes of no other fighter has done before. And Francis Ngannou, one of the hardest punchers and just one of the most dangerous finishers of all time when it comes to the heavyweight division. 3 different types of fighters, 3 different guys fighting at heavyweight all at the same time. 3 guys. Francis Ngannou, John Jones, Tom Aspinall at the top of their game, in their prime, in terms of their MMA careers, at the top of the game, and they probably will never fight each other. Such a shame. Let's move on to the rest of the card. Cris Cyborg in the co-main event, also fighting for a PFL superfight title, took on Larissa Pacheco. Former 155 and 145 PFL champion, has beaten the likes of Kayla Harrison, albeit by split decision. Finally came up against the best MMA women's fighter of all time. We can see here she was the Strikeforce champion in 2009. These are all the belts she has. She has collected almost every single belt across every single major promotion when it comes to women's fighting. Strikeforce first in 2009. Invicta champ, women's promotion predominantly Invicta, we know that. 2013. UFC champ, came over to the UFC. Bellator, went over to Bellator after the UFC, got the title there, and then now PFL champ. 12 total title defenses and title fights. First belt she earned at the age of 24, all the way back in 2009 at Strikeforce. Strikeforce doesn't even exist anymore. And now at 39 years old, almost 40 years old, wins over one of the most dangerous punchers in women's MMA history, Larissa Pacheco. Some argue she could be a man. We don't know what's going on there. That aside, we're not going to get into all that. But it was one of my most anticipated women's fights of all time because Cris Cyborg's still dangerous. She mixes it up and she's dangerous everywhere. That's why I like Cris Cyborg. And Larissa Pacheco, obviously a dangerous power puncher, but really doesn't have much else to offer. Yes, they built this off of her beating Kayla Harrison. Larissa Pacheco once beat Kayla Harrison by split decision, just not but 2 years ago. Now, Kayla Harrison could not throw elbows in that fight. As we have seen from Kayla Harrison in her previous 2 MMA fights in the UFC, her elbows are her most dangerous weapon, and you took that away from her. She still beat Larissa Pacheco the first 2 times they fought, easily dispatched of her, and the 3rd time went to a split decision. Come on. Larissa Pacheco finally coming up against a well-rounded martial artist. Kayla Harrison is not so good in the wrestling department. She's good at judo. Once she gets a hold of you, she can get you down to the ground. She doesn't have the best boxing on the feet. Somebody like Cyborg is well-rounded. She has good boxing, good kickboxing technique, and can wrestle. And the moment that Larissa Pacheco finally came up against a good mixed martial artist who mixes it up, it was just all-out domination from Cris Cyborg. There were a couple cuts that opened up. Larissa landed a couple of big shots. If she was any other woman, let's be honest, those shots would not have affected Cyborg as much. One of the cuts was even from the original takedown. Beautiful, where Larissa Pacheco throwing her looping punches as she always does. Cris dips under it, picks her up, takes her down. Beautiful performance by Cris Cyborg. Awesome to see her winning at 39 years old. Now, the rest of the card consisted of, at least the main card. The interesting fights is what I'm going to talk about, not the entire card. Johnny Eblen got the job done over Fabian Edwards. Fabian Edwards' brother to Leon Edwards, the former welterweight UFC champ. Fabian Edwards was rematching Johnny Eblen for the 2nd time. They were fighting for the 2nd time. It was a rematch of the title fight not but a year and a half ago. And Johnny Eblen absolutely dominated the fight. There were a couple moments which Fabian had some striking going on the feet, landing on Johnny in the 5th round. Probably the 5th round was Fabian Edwards' best round, but Johnny Eblen just beat him pillar to post. He was out striking him early on in the fight. He was just getting to him, pushing him up against the cage, beating him up along the cage, taking him down, beating him up on the ground. It was Johnny Eblen's fight from pillar to post, aside from a couple of moments that Fabian had. Fabian's just not quite as dangerous or as explosive as he needed to be to take out a well-rounded mixed martial artist like Johnny Eblen. Good for Johnny for getting the win. A little bit weird here. Not even sure why he was fighting Fabian to begin with. There's other guys out there for Johnny Eblen to be fighting that we need to see him fight. There's guys out there like Derek Brunson. Yes, UFC vet, older guy, not in the prime of his career. But it would be interesting to see that. Use the value of Derek Brunson. But of course, they're not using that because of reasons, which I'll make a video about it soon. PFL, this bullshit going on. Everybody's catching on. Nobody's interested in it. we're just here for a big fight. You can put on big events and nobody cares about the rest of your promotion. That's what happened today. So good for Johnny Eblen getting the win in enemy hostile territory across the world. Now, big surprise. Paul, the big news, Hughes, gets a huge victory over AJ McKee. This was very disappointing. AJ McKee is one of my favorite fighters. The chaotic fight style that he has, where he mixes up both his grappling and his stand-up ability with submission threats. Guy's fun to watch across the board. AJ McKee is Paul Hughes. Mostly a very calm, relaxed, ones and twos kind of striker, and then a grappler smother type when he gets to the ground. And he absolutely, dare I say, dominated AJ McKee in moments of the fight. Hurt AJ McKee badly at the end of the first, was getting out of every submission attempt that AJ was throwing up. He just couldn't do much to Paul Hughes on the ground, and Paul Hughes just kind of outstruck him, kind of outworked him. AJ McKee was a little too chaotic in there. The straight-laced fundamentals guy, Paul Hughes, got it done. And you know what? Good for him. This was arguably my most anticipated fight of the entire weekend. I don't know. AJ looked a little funny in there, like he wasn't ready. Paul Hughes looked a little nervous coming into it, but man, he put on a great promo and it was calling for the Usman Nurmagomedov fight after he won. We all wanted to see AJ McKee, Bellator's arguably best fighter, take on Usman Nurmagomedov, another of their arguably best fighters outside of the UFC. AJ McKee and Usman have been long discussed for the past couple of years as the two best guys outside of the UFC. And you know what? Paul Hughes disregarded all of that mess and just steamrolled through AJ McKee. He didn't finish him. It was a close split decision, yes, but just not a super fun, entertaining fight. It just was what it was. AJ McKee a little bit disappointing there. I'm sure he'll get back on his feet and get in there with some entertaining guys, put on some good performances. And Paul Hughes, this guy's fucking legit. AJ McKee has beaten the likes of Patricio Pitbull, and Paul Hughes just beat him. So let's see what's next for Paul Hughes. Hopefully it's the Usman Nurmagomedov fight. Might as well put it together while we can. Talk about having Conor in his corner, Khabib in Usman's corner, having this whole Russia versus Irish thing going on again. The Ireland crowd versus the Russian crowd. That whole mess that went on back at UFC, what was that, 229 at this point? My goodness, the Conor-Khabib rivalry, reigniting that in Paul Hughes and Usman Nurmagomedov. That would be fun for sure. Now, I can't move on without at least making note of this again. Francis Ngannou, his son Kobe, lost his life tragically at the beginning of the year. Here's Francis with Kobe, his young son. Absolutely beautiful here between father and son. Breaks my heart. I mean, just such a great person like Francis, who's overcome so much in his life, had to deal with something so tragic once again. I don't know what else to say. There's no words that I can give, but as a father, to lose your son, I cannot even fathom what that is like. Francis doesn't usually show his children or his family very much, keeps that very private, but here's a picture of Kobe to remember him. What an adorable little kid. We're praying for Francis. Francis, we love you, man. Great performance. If he retires here on after, doesn't really do much else in MMA in terms of the fighting, I really wouldn't blame him. You know what? He got the win, was able to kind of fight and live and provide for his family through his son, through the power that his son has provided him. Very, very special stuff. And we're wishing Francis all the best as he continues to mourn the loss of his son and keep going forward and live on and strive to provide a better legacy for Kobe, because Kobe deserves that. Tragic when young kids lose their lives like that. Absolutely everything going out to Francis. He's the winner of this weekend. He deserves all the flowers in the world. I can't say any much more than that. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.